I'm one of the few people you'll meet who've written more books than they've read. I felt I'd taken the novel as far as it could go. I guess it was inevitable that my imagination would make the move to television.
I got a script, read it, scared me senseless, calmed attitude, and I said to Garth, I looked straight into his face, I've never been afraid of holding a man's gaze, it's natural. I said, this is going to be the most significant televisual event since Quantum Leap. And I do not say that lightly.
Hello, listening people.
Hello.
You're listening to Spit and Polish Presents. I am one of your hosts, or Dreamweaver, as I like to be called, Ryan Sawinski.
And I'm Bartek, but just call me host.
How are you doing, Bartek?
Good. How are you doing, Ryan, the Dreamweaver?
I'm doing very well. We're here doing our monthly show, a monthly fill-in lockdown, quarantine, COVID-19 special, a televisual event. I'm very excited to talk about the televisual event we've got lined up for this one.
Yeah, this one has probably been a long time coming.
Yeah, it's the reason the name exists in the first place, isn't it?
I noticed, yes, the first episode.
You didn't remember that that's where it came from?
No, I didn't.
Well, let's stop cock-teasing. We are going to be talking about Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, an English television show from the, just around the mid-2000s, like 2004?
I think 2004 is the year, yeah.
Starring a few people of note, especially if you know your British comedy scene. It's got Richard Ayoade, Matt Berry, and a sprinkling of several other notable people that just kind of pop in there. Bartek, what is Garth Marenghi's Darkplace?
So Garth Marenghi's Darkplace is a television show from 2004, and in keeping with the often applicable tradition of this particular podcast, it is a TV show about people that have a TV show where watching that TV show is what we are getting out of it. So this one is about a horror writer named Garth Marenghi, who is very pretentious and philosophical in his horror writing, who every episode begins with him directly addressing the audience and telling them about how he made a TV show back in the 1980s with a friend of his, and it did not do well, but due to circumstances, recent circumstances, he is able to show us, the audience, the TV show with some added narration sprinkled in to explain the deeper themes because we might be too dumb to get it.
And the behind-the-scenes information with him, and interviews interspersed with him, his friend and publisher Dean Lerner, who's also an actor in the show, in their show, and the other actor Todd Rivers, and they give behind-the-scenes information. Yeah,
the three male leads of the show.
And of course, this is all fake, it's fictitious, Garth Marenghi is a character, he's not real, and he's very much a Stephen King riff. And of course, the big thing is he is schlocky, he writes schlock horror, he's very pretentious, and he's a bad writer, but he thinks he's a genius.
Yeah, and one of the big appeals of this show for the two of us is that it is the kind of show where it's got those two layers of the real world, where the people who make the TV show express their logic, and then there's the TV show itself, and just seeing how the two interconnect. So, like, you might see a very weird acting decision in the TV show, and then the interviews that we get with the people that made it will sort of, like, explain the headspace of why they made that decision.
It is the juxtaposition of what is being said in the real world with what's being shown in the actual TV show, but also the rationalization of decisions that they made as well. Because sometimes it'll be like, oh, I've never acted, and some say I didn't act during, but I tried my best and all that. And then you see the shot of him acting in the show, and it's horrendous. But then there are things that, like, they have constant slow motion, and then it will cut to someone explaining why they did that, and the budgetary and the technical circumstances of why they had to do that, and the rationalizing of these decisions that we, Bartek, have often seen and heard described by filmmakers and creators of lower end things, specifically The Disaster Artist comes to mind, and people like that, your Tommy Wiseau's, your Neil Breen's, and the guy did Birdemic, the way that they rationalize and discuss the decisions that they made, and the way that they talk about it's like, oh, it all makes sense, but as a viewer, it's still weird nonsense to us. And this show, Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, is a brilliant comedic send-up of that kind of stuff, as well as the obvious jokes about your pretentious artists and your Stephen King types and those 80s spooky horror shows.
Yeah, and even with some of the examples you listed, this kind of predates a lot of them, so it's very interesting to see that.
Yeah. So, Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, of course. If you have not seen this show, go ahead and watch it. It's on YouTube for some reason. I don't know if it's what the legalities of that are, but they're all there, including the special features and the extras and stuff. Go watch it. It is a joy, it is a delight, and it is a perfect show to watch for this time of year. 6 episodes. That's all there are. Just 6 episodes. You get some bonus stuff, but that's it. There's only 1 season of this show, and then they stop doing it. That is your typical British affair, and it is glorious. So make sure to watch it, because we're going to be talking about it. I know it sounds silly to say spoilers for this, but it is a comedy show, and it does have a plot. They do have plots in their episodes, and some of those plots are a joy to behold for yourself without having someone tell you what they are, because some of them are just like truly absurd nonsense. So do go check it out, because we are going to be talking about it. Now, Bartek, what is your history and relationship with Garth Marenghi's Darkplace?
So it very closely connects to my relationship with the Ryan Slewinski. We became friends in 2014. It was kind of blooming in the first half of the year. Then in the second half of the year, it was the last trimester of our drama degree, and we obviously had our timetables kind of line up a little bit. I remember after the very first thing I did of that trimester, I met up with you and we both had free time, and you didn't live too far from the university, so we went to hang out at your house for the first time.
Yeah.
The house where we began this podcast just a year or so later. And one of the things we did while chilling was you put on this show called Garth Marenghi's Darkplace. I'd never heard of it before, but you sold me on it. We checked out the first episode, and I really enjoyed it. And I think the next couple of weeks, you showed me just episode after episode.
Yeah.
I don't know if we ever got to the final one, but I know we definitely got up to the 5th one.
The Scotch Mist.
Yeah.
And why does that one stand out as particularly memorable for you?
Mainly the thick Scottish accents and the subtitles.
Not his traumatized story about going to Scotland that one time?
No. It was the visuals of the subtitles.
Nice. So yeah, my history with Garth Marenghi's Darkplace is, and just to go broader, I'm a big fan of British comedy shows, and even when this show came out, I was a huge fan of shows that were currently on at that time, like Black Books, for example. Spaced was only a few years earlier, and so on and so forth. Like, I was a huge fan. I liked the IT Crowd, of course, which I knew Richard Ayoade from, but I did not know about Garth Marenghi's Darkplace. I had not heard about it. It somehow had slipped me by until very early on when I was at university. One of my sister's housemates at the time was talking about it, and they were stunned that none of us had heard of Garth Marenghi's Darkplace because of our eclectic taste in comedy shows, and specifically British ones, and somehow this had slipped us by. Like, my sister, my family, just all of us, we had not heard of this show, and they described it to us, and we eventually checked it out. We got given a copy of it somehow, and I remember going from my sister's place. We went back to my parents' place in another town, and we sat down and we watched that first episode, and I have never, like, oh man, it's been a while since, and it's been a while before that since I laughed so hard. Tears were going down my face with laughter from that very first episode. As soon as we see the show and she gets a cat thrown at her from a stagehand, and the cat speaks, and she just is like, funny, that cat just told me to, I think that cat just told me to leave, and she just walks off. Tears rolling down my face, and I knew that this would be a show I would love, and I do. I love Garth Marenghi's Darkplace. It's an absolute classic, and to me, it is a perfect show. There's no flaws to it, and at the same time, that's kind of by design, right? Because all the flaws in the show are on purpose. Like,
yeah, they're disguised if there are any flaws.
it is brilliant acting from all the actual actors playing these characters who are playing character, and so on and so forth. There's a lot to think about with the mechanics of it all, but the acting's great, the production design, just the amount of effort it actually takes to make something on purposely bad, but still competent enough for it to be like entertaining, because obviously that's a thing now that is far more prevalent since stuff like Sharknado, where people on purposely trying to make so bad it's good quality stuff that they just tip over into being either boring or just plain old bad, or missing the point of what is the joy of a so bad it's good type piece of entertainment. While Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, it does it perfectly. It perfectly captures the joy that you get from those things. And like you said, this kind of predates some of the stuff like the room had existed and stuff, and sure, it was getting popular around this time, but the whole behind-the-scenes information of how that movie got made wasn't really out in the general sphere of information. And the idea of these people who made these terrible products or movies or failed projects discussing the minutia of how they fucked up was also not really a prevalent thing at that time either. So this kind of really went ahead of the curve in a lot of ways with some stuff.
Yeah, ahead of its time a bit. I remember earlier this year, during like the brief period in the middle where we weren't under lockdown, I went to visit a friend's house and we watched a film called Velocipasta, mix of Velociraptor and pasta, like the religious people, and it was one of those films that like was trying to imitate So Bad It's Good, and yeah, it was that type of film where there were some pretty funny moments, but all of the stuff like in between the funny moments were kind of boring, and I was basically spending the whole movie just pointing out all these little things that they could have done to make it more interesting. And yeah, it was a real, it's a real example of something that doesn't quite capture the appeal of like how Garth Marenghi's Darkplace does.
Yeah, because just to discuss a little further with that kind of stuff, I think sometimes the failure with those projects they are like, obviously the intent isn't in the right place. The intent is to try and be shit. But usually what makes the actual So Bad It's Good things so enjoyable is the absolute ignorance and cluelessness of the creator, and or pure arrogance. And that's what Garth Marenghi is really tapping into more so, is the pure arrogance of these people making this show, as well as the ignorance. But it's the real egocentric madness and arrogance that, people like Tommy Wiseau have for sure, but we kind of look at Tommy Wiseau, most people kind of look at him as that, oh, he was just an ignorant foreign man who didn't know what he was doing and he had all this money. But he's an arrogant guy, for sure. But Garth Marenghi's Darkplace captures that kind of intent that makes projects like this fail, because even to go beyond just, the So Bad It's Good kind of stuff, Bartek, you mentioned we did this. We watched this when we were at university, and we work in the creative sphere. We watched and met and have encountered a lot of people who have made failed attempts at artistic endeavors, and a lot of them fall on their face for the same reasons Garth Marenghi's Darkplace in the actual world of the show failed, because they didn't know what they were doing, but they were arrogant enough to think that they did know.
Mm-hmm.
And even that, on the basic level of that, is entertaining enough, and it succeeds at doing that stuff.
Yeah, and one thing that I really appreciate about it is that we have 4 primarily main characters to watch, and they all give sort of different levels of bad performing. Like, there's the one guy who absolutely has never acted, and he's just flatly reading his lines quickly.
Yeah.
There's a guy who has the cool voice, but he reads his lines kind of awkwardly.
Yeah.
There's the woman who reads her lines too quickly, and then there's Garth Marenghi, who is the one who is the passionate heart of the project, and you can see that there's a lot of overacting going on with him, and a lot of purpose that is just incredibly blatant.
Yes, self-aggrandizing.
Yep, another thing that I really appreciate is there's a lot of a lack of subtlety that is incredibly blunt, especially with like the misogyny. It's like an intentional misogyny to look at how these characters are flawed because of their misogyny, but it's just like so in your face about it that it's hilarious.
Yeah, so Garth Marenghi's Darkplace has always it's always held a special place in my heart, because other than it's incredibly funny, the obvious statement, it's incredibly funny. The jokes, it's jokes upon jokes upon jokes. So many quotable lines of dialogue in this show. But one of the things I love about it is it just captures so perfectly that pretentious art energy that I roll my eyes at so often, having studied art and drama and been in the world of theater and done film stuff and, podcast stuff. I love that. It just captures so well that kind of pretentious moi energy that artists and people who are trying to tell stories can have. And there are so many examples of things that they do or say in this show that I just use as a descriptor for other things that fail, like just so many moments, like when we watch a thing and they're just padding out the time. I just often will say, I wonder if if they considered this section for slow motion just to make it go longer, because that whole sentiment is great.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that aspect of the show particularly because I have a seething hatred for that type of behavior, and it seems like they do too. Like, it seems like when they went through the whole process of doing theater and doing all that kind of stuff, and they had met so many people like this, as well as the famous examples. Like, obviously Garth Marenghi is a Stephen King type, and Stephen King is very kind of up his own arse a little. And just the absolute loathing of that, and just putting that in as one of the central threads of comedy within the show is particularly appealing to me. Garth Marenghi's like, he's written more books than he's read is a classic example of this type of behavior. Or I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards. That one is particularly applicable for a lot of situations, especially in bad writing.
Yeah, I think there was like this is something way in the back of my head, but I think it was when you were telling me about the Game of Thrones writers. They had a quote that was like very similar.
Yeah, they said
subtext is for high school essays or something.
Yeah, I think I can't remember if it was that or themes of high school.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was themes or subtext, but it was very Garth Marenghian.
Yeah, that was it.
So it's been quite a few years since you've experienced this. How was it for you on this rewatch?
Good. It was quite nice. I didn't remember everything. I kind of just remembered the general tone of it. But also since in that time I have experienced a lot more things that have comedic value due to their low budget or, so bad it's good natures. A lot more little things were sticking out to me, like poor timing, moments where like a character would glance into the camera, things like that. So definitely, even though I don't remember everything from my first viewing, I know that I've caught a lot more than that first time.
Did you have was there a particular moment of like the deliberate poor execution that stood out to you?
It was a fairly big one, to be honest, but when Garth Marenghi is going to drink the green water, and he just stops, and there's like a full second before the interruption that was meant to stop him happens. That one really got me.
One of the ones that really got me is every now and then when Sanchez would talk and they would dub him like he's ADR'd. Like most of his lines are ADR'd, but every now and then it did sound like they just got a different actor to say a specific word in a line. Like sometimes It didn't sound like Matt Berry, and I don't know if that's 100% the case, but there's just every now and then there's just a word or a sentence that doesn't sound like Matt Berry at all. And it throws you off. Or my favorite particular visual gag in the whole entire show is in the very first episode, which I think is my favorite episode of the entire show. I don't know. It has everything I want from the show. But Dean Lerner, the who's playing what was his character's name again in the actual show?
It slipped my mind. I can't remember.
Dean Lerner. He's Thornton Reed. Thornton Reed is holding a shovel in a scene, and he's holding it up. It is covered in blood, and the camera is looking at him, and he's talking about like, I just won't do it, Garth. I just can't do it, and he's just refusing to help Garth out, and he holds up his other hand as an example of like to better help what he's saying, as like, if I could, my hands are full, my hand, he holds up his other hand and he puts it down. And as soon as he puts it down, that's when the camera decides to gently pan over to where his hand was when it was up. And then it briefly just goes back.
I remember that.
It's very, very quiet of a camera movie. Like, it's not overtly like, oh, it's missed its timing. It's just subtle enough where it's obvious enough for you to...
Gentle is the right word.
Yeah, it's gentle. It's obvious enough for you to notice it, but not so blatantly obvious that it makes you go, oh, that was done specifically nothing but for a gag. It is just subtle enough for you to buy into how incompetent the cameraman was on that particular day. And yeah, I particularly noticed on this rewatching of it is I can't imagine them doing more episodes of it, because to me, they jammed in literally every kind of fuck up you can do in film or TV. Like there's even a point where they do just still images and just narrate over it. Or there's even an episode where a whole conversation is just random shots of things in the room and not the actors. Like it just cuts to like random shots of a plant in a corner or a clock on the wall. Like I don't know how they could do more episodes of it without having to just kind of recycle through some of the technical fuck-ups you can do.
Yeah, it's very Naked Gun. Sorry, not Naked Gun, Police Squad.
Police Squad in color. Yeah. So who was your favorite character on this watching of it?
I really liked Dean Lerner / Thornton Reed.
What about him appealed to you?
He's very pure in the reason why he's a bad actor. He's never acted before, but he thinks that there's a justification for it. And just every gag that plays into that is simultaneously monotone, but also very purposeful. Like the constant like banging of his hand against the desk. The timing is never quite perfect, and it's always just kind of, a very almost fluid motion that clearly indicates that he doesn't know the impact that it's making.
Yeah.
And he's got that voice, that monotone voice that's got that kind of like twang to it.
Yes.
And he just like rushes through all his words.
Except for when he doesn't, and they really, really slow down, and it's really awkward, like the things conversation. You remember the things conversation? Where they just kept saying...
The one where he's like, there's something
thing.
you're hiding?
Yeah, and that one's just
Yeah.
great. Things, Dag. Things.
He's also got very, very good on the phone acting.
That is the best bad acting of the whole entire show, is when he hangs it up and then gently as well, looks over and says, bye. Because he had forgotten to say it, but then he remembered. And no joke, we've seen that type of thing when we were at university or when we've seen theatre, where actors just sometimes, good or bad, for some reason, sometimes that mistake is made. I don't know if you've ever made it, but where you remember that you forgot a specific line and you think that you can just jam it back in again because somehow that will make it better. But all it does is just point out the flaw.
Yeah, it is a familiar concept.
It is a familiar concept if you've been in that world before. So you sound like you like more Dean Lerner playing Thornton Reed. Is that it? Because that's kind of also the thing, is every character has another character as well. There's the real version of them, and then there's the characters they play in their show.
Well, one of the real versions is probably dead, so they don't appear. But yeah, the behind the scenes stuff is all great stuff. But it is also like very different. It's very slow, and they have an understanding that like that part of the show is not going to have like the sort of fuck up gags. It's going to have the more, psychological stuff going on.
And that's where I go, well, to me, Dean Lerner, the man, is my favorite character in the entire show. He says some fucked up shit with a straight face. Like, he's clearly a murderer. He's clearly killed her, the actress, and buried her. If she even has a grave. And I love Dean Lerner. Like, I like Richard Ayoade. Richard Ayoade is a very funny guy. I've listened to, his audio book that he recently did, where it's a memoir about himself, but also it's him on purposely not having an autobiography on himself, but instead dedicating the time to talk about Gwyneth Paltrow's movie Over the Top, as if it is Citizen Kane. It is Unappreciated Masterpieces, the book. And
okay.
It is great, but I like him as a person, as a creator. I like him as a director as well, but he always has this kind of weird energy to him, and he brings that weird energy and makes it really dark when he's Dean Lerner, because Dean Lerner is like an evil, evil man, but he has that voice, and he has that whole entire demeanor that Richard Ayoade has, which is he's the biggest dork and nerd you've ever encountered in your life, hence he's great in the IT crowd. But Dean Lerner isn't that. He is supposed to be a Hugh Hefner type, right? But they've cast Richard Ayoade to play him, so it feels like even that is false. So everything about Dean Lerner feels like an absolute lie. And that's kind of what I love about him. There's just the casting choice of having him as Dean Lerner, because really, if it was anyone else, they most likely would have cast Matt Berry, right, as Dean Lerner. He's played that type of character more so, that sleazy ladies man who's, got money and power. He plays that type of character in the IT crowd, but casting Richard Ayoade as that character adds something else to it. And I love when Dean Lerner gets really emotional and sentimental out of nowhere. Like when he's talking about, my favorite kind of Dean Lerner moment is when he's talking about, now I don't know if someone close to Garth or has exploded before. There's a whole monologue about that, but you could tell that scene meant a lot to Garth because it was so genuine, and there was a lot of emotions on set. There were tears, not from Garth, of course. He kept strong for the crew, but I cried. Like, I like those really sincere, weird moments from Dean Lerner, because then you get the quick, swift kick in the head, in which he's completely like the opposite of that, in which he's just casually dropping sinister pieces of information and then just not wanting to touch it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he killed the cat. just randomly that comes out. Like, why did he mention that? And I love Dean Lerner because he's absolutely despicable. Like, Garth Marenghi, the character, is great. He's, he lives up to his namesake. Like, he is the perfect person to center a show around, Garth Marenghi, because he has some of the best lines in all of comedy history. But Dean Lerner, I love him. I love his delivery. I love everything about... I love his hat that he wears jauntily to the side. I love his big fat cigar that he holds. Which I swear in one of the extras he says he doesn't smoke cigarettes because he doesn't want to get cancer as he's smoking his big fat cigar. Yeah, it is a joy to behold. And of course, Dean Lerner has the famous line, a televisual event, which is in regards to that Darkplace would be the biggest televisual event since Quantum Leap. And I don't know why, but that line has always stuck with me. Just, again, it's the sincerity that Dean Lerner says that with. Like, you could tell that Dean Lerner and Garth Marenghi, as arrogant as they are, they genuinely thought during the process of making Darkplace that they thought it was going to be good. It wasn't just a piece of shit that they were making for money. Like, that's what I also like about this show is the characters within it genuinely thought that they were going to make something great, and or they believe they have made something great. I think Todd Rivers is like the only one who kind of is the closest to seeing it for the piece of shit that it is. But even he is pretty deluded.
He's not as big in the production as the other two are. But yeah, and the fact that they love the product and think that it is great kind of lends itself to that idea of, why we enjoy products that are so bad they're good. It's because they believe that they were making something great, and you can see all the purpose behind it.
So, what was your favorite episode?
That's a really difficult question to answer because there's just so many gags that, like, could have been in any episode, but, like, they were all centered around a plot.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, one of the things I really enjoyed about it, I know I'm avoiding the question, but they didn't really have, like, scenes that wasted time. Everything kind of felt like they had purpose towards the story of the episode.
Yeah.
Which, that's a very weird, almost compliment you can give the show. But favorite episode, I think maybe the second episode.
Which is?
There are a lot of... That's the one with Liz going crazy and, like, making objects fly around.
Yes.
There are a lot of gags there. Like, a lot of these episodes do fall into, like, typical TV show tropes. Like, one of them has a running gag that doesn't serve the narrative much, where they've done a prank on Thornton Reed where people keep calling him thinking that they're calling a massage parlor or something like that.
A male massage parlor.
Male massage parlor. That one has... And that episode, the one that I said is probably my favorite, is the one where they have, like, the one episode only character, this temp, an intern, who seems... The show seems to want to have it be that this guy... is not gonna be on the same side as Garth because he sees, like, obvious flaws in him, but then as they work together throughout the episode, they're gonna see eye to eye and form, like, a
bond.
A bond that, might be long lasting should he live past the episode. But their interactions are incredibly minimal outside of, like, their meeting and the character's death.
And it is so on point for a lot of shows, and not just shows from the 80s, but a lot of shows. Like, I love Star Trek, but there are so many episodes of Star Trek, new and old, that have very similar type of characters and moments. And it is so on point. And also, like, he's the American, but he has, like, a non-American name, and then they have to explain it, and he's born here, and it's this, and then what's that? Oh, it's when a queen dictates this, and it just goes on. And that's another thing I like, is in the show that they make of Darkplace, because Garth Marenghi, the writer, fills up his books with absolute nonsense. Like at the beginning of each episode, we're getting a slice of one of his books, and they're all like lots of synonyms and just lots of same words over and over again. But in the show, there's also that too, where characters give very detailed pieces of information that is completely irrelevant and completely pointless. And it's not just because in the universe they're trying to fill up time, but it's also because that's what Garth Marenghi as a writer is like. He just feels the need to put detailed, pointless information in for no reason. And there's so many gags with stuff like that. Like in the first episode, I really like the Padre, who's a character I think is really overlooked in the grand scheme of things. I love him. And he has his sermon at the end where he's talking about God moves in mysterious ways, and he's detailing all the ways he moves, and it's just like sometimes
all the angles.
Sometimes he comes in at an angle or from beneath like a worm. Just goes on and on. I love that kind of stuff. But yeah, the second episode's a particularly good one. That one also has the recurring thing of, like you said before, the sexism angle that the show has woven throughout it, that misogyny of obviously, since this show, the actual show, was made in the 2000s and it's riffing on the 1980s style, that also is very funny as well, because in a lot of those shows in the 80s in particular as well, there was that kind of humor there, especially in British ones as well, but just that, oh, we make fun of the woman and ha 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 ha, and maybe they'll have an episode where they address the fact that that's wrong, but by the end they'll look at her ass and ask for some buns anyway. They've learned nothing.
Yeah, that was great. It was like I was kind of impressed. Like, oh, okay, so these characters actually, the story has it so that all these misogynistic moments are intentional, but then yeah, you get the buns thing, and it's like, oh no, the characters aren't changing.
I love Liz as well. I like her as an actress. She's in just heaps of stuff. Like if you've watched Horrible Histories, she's in that. She was in a movie she directed and I think she directed and wrote called Pre-Vengeance, which is an interesting little horror comedy movie where she's a serial killer who's like 9 months pregnant, and she thinks that her baby inside of her is like a demonic creature that's talking to her and convincing her to go kill people. Very good movie.
Yeah, you know what?
Very good movie.
I can kind of see her doing well in a horror film, like a genuine horror product.
Yeah, and can we one of my favorite episodes too is I like the last episode of Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, in which the woman becomes a broccoli, because it's just straight out of Doctor Who. There's like so many moments that are like, oh, this is straight out Lost in Space Doctor Who type schlock and stuff like that. And that one really reminded me of like Sylvester McCoy era Doctor Who, which is around that era, like late 80s, early 90s Doctor Who, in which there's like a few episodes where people get like turned into green moss type creatures, and it just reminded me of that, and I loved it. I love everything about the show. The music. Oh, Bartek, what do you think about the music and the random songs here and there?
Yeah, that I really enjoy the opening theme. It's this very old school type of music playing, and even the special effects complement it really well. It's this mysterious kind of thing, but it feels like not of our time.
Yeah.
Which means that the show nailed it, since this is meant to be them presenting a TV show they made 20 years prior, and the cut in tone between the intro where Garth Marenghi's addressing the audience and the intro beginning is just incredibly jarring and puts you right into the mood for what you're about to see.
Yeah, I love, obviously the aesthetic of the show is on point. You know, it does the right amount of over-the-top 80s aesthetic. Right amount. It doesn't go into Kung Fury territory. Again, it isn't going so overboard with trying to be shit that it becomes lame in itself. Because one of the things I think actually works really well, and this actually is a compliment even though they're probably not going for this, is this does actually capture some really creepy, weird horror imagery that's actually kind of interesting. Like obviously there's still comedic stuff, but there's like that sequence at in the very first episode where she shakes Sanchez's hand and he just starts screaming and it just goes on and she's like screaming in a void, and obviously it's played for comedy, but the actual visuals being shown, it has like those October feels. You know what I'm saying? Like it actually does at points, Garth Marenghi's Darkplace does actually silly or otherwise evoke that horror schlock sensibility that is actually genuine in its own right. Like just the absurdity of seeing a bald man's head on the ground saying, "I think I'm gonna die," after he's exploded. It's silly.
It really hurts.
I love when he delivers that line. It really hurts. And that's like what pushes Garth. Well, it really hurts.
Yeah.
But
that was a great line.
Visually, it's on point. Like even in the interviews, like Dean Lerner's wearing a silly outfit, but it's just on the right amount. And Garth Marenghi is perfect, you know? Black on black with a purple tie. Perfect. And the leather jacket and everything. And the belt with the bull on it. And everything is perfect with the visuals. The way that they block scenes is perfect and how terrible it is. The amount of space they leave above people's heads. But I love the music. Like, I love the songs that are in Garth Marenghi's Darkplace. The One Track Lover is a song I unironically listen to at this point every night. It's in my rotation.
Yeah, again, I don't know if I watched that last episode with you, but somehow I had heard that song before, so that's kind of the big confusion for me.
I just sometimes quote that song just randomly, like, "She's smooth like ice, cold to the touch and ain't very nice." I think I love, you know, with the music, the music isn't shit. Like, you know, in the actual show, it's not like they do the gag where the music's really shitty. It actually does sound like that would have been in an actual 1980s television show.
Mm-hmm.
And it could have been so easy for them to just cheap out and do that, where it's like, oh, the music's like really zany and really over the top and really shit. But the actual music in the show, I don't feel like it's absolute garbage. It's actually like, no, this feels like it would have been in an episode of Magnum P.I. or if this would have been in a TV adaptation of a Stephen King book. So
yeah, the fuck up with the music is what visuals they pair it with, or like the acting that's present while it's playing. It's like this is too good for what is being shown.
One of my favorite music or audio related running gags that it particularly plays out when you own this on DVD, I guess this would have been different when you watched it on actual TV with ad breaks, is when it does cut to ad breaks and they just have the Garth Marenghi's head pop up and it splits and you have like that kind of chime sound and that wurgling sound, and it just kind of stops because there was going to be an ad break there, and then it just kind of breaks back in again. It's very disorientating when you watch it.
Yeah, it was on the YouTube versions as well. And I think the last episode, it didn't have the sounds for when it was going into the ad
No,
break,
it
but
didn't.
the sounds were there when it was coming out.
It was very weird. And of course the very end credits where it just is him typing at the desk and it's like a Garth Marenghi production, and then very quickly in association with Dean Lerner, it cuts off before he even says all of it because they ran out of time.
Yeah, you have to very quickly jam it in.
Yeah. I think this show is perfect, and it is perfect for this time of year because it does actually capture that horror world of your Stephen Kings and your sci-fi schlocky type of writers. I'm not saying Stephen King's a schlocky writer, but you know, he has his kind of things that he likes, and this show is obviously riffing on that. Like their Planet of the Apes episode, perfect.
The Apes of Wrath.
The Apes of Wrath. Or I can't remember which one it was. I think it was I can't remember, but there's one episode where at the very beginning Garth Marenghi tells you right off the bat that there's not going to be an explanation for that, so don't expect this to come around at the end. You're not going to get it.
Yep. Yeah, there was something like that.
I can't remember, but I was like, perfect. But we're going to talk about Skipper, the Eye Child.
Yes, yeah, that was episode like 3 or 4, I think.
Yeah.
I think 3.
It has one of the great lines from the behind-the-scenes interviews in which the premise of that one was a giant eyeball man violated another man and made him pregnant, and he gave birth to an eyeball that Garth Marenghi, that Rick Douglas, became infatuated with because he had lost his own son, who was a half grasshopper, and he had jumped into a helicopter, presumably. What a great plot that is, huh?
Yeah, I just remember now. Garth has Rick has a little song at one point, doesn't he?
Yeah. Which, if you own the DVD, is used in a haunting manner on the extras menu. Like, it's done in a chintzy manner, but
it was ridiculous, but it was also kind of like sad.
Yeah,
in a way.
Yeah, but there's that line of dialogue in the Skip of the Eye Child episode in which Dean Lerner, I think, was explaining that the actor wasn't happy. The one who got impregnated, he wasn't happy that day. You know, he was a real complainer and all that. But we know, and they all described, like, we had a closed off set. The guy in the suit, you know, he knew and up until that day trusted. That says a lot.
They were talking about it with this real, like, for them, sense of maturity. Like, yeah, this was a very passionate scene that we knew was going to be emotional for the people involved, so, you know, not everyone could see it. But they clearly didn't know what was literally going to happen.
Yeah. I do love, for me at this point, I've watched it so many times, those are the type of gags that really hit hard for me, are those really dark ones, like when Dean Lerner's talking about how many people he's lost to AIDS. Like, AIDS, you know, it's the AIDS. It's terrible, you know, I had a stepbrother and all that, and of course, Freddie gone. There's nothing to actually say about AIDS. Like, but yeah, Skip the Eye Child. One of the things I always think about with that episode too is that one in particular. With the first one, I want to say all of them do, but those two in particular, I always think of their visual gags. They have a lot of fun visual gags, like one that I always think that you would love, and it's such a Naked Gun type gag, which is, Rick, the test results are in. It's evil, and Sanchez holds up a piece of paper that says test results and points at it.
Mm-hmm.
In a very
I think they do that twice in the show.
Very over the top manner. That one, or the little helicopter toy behind Garth Marenghi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That episode too, the Eye Child one, was one where there was a real strong purpose behind a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, where they were talking about how this episode in particular is a really emotional one for Garth Marenghi, the man, because, you know, he's always wanted a son and things like that. And he's always talking about how, you know, he lost a son that was actually named Skipper. And even that, at the end of the episode, is revealed to be a very long setup for a punchline where the son Skipper was actually a dog.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so I think the line that I've quoted the most, and you've heard me quote it, Bartek, you've probably forgotten at this point that this is from Garth Marenghi, and it's such a stupid line, and my wife gets so annoyed with me using it because I use it in reference to myself and or reference to her, which is the I'm a big girl now, and a year's time I'll be a woman. That line in the very first episode from Liz, I don't know why, it has always stuck with me, and I just use it every now and then when people are being like, particularly condescending, or when my wife Rachel says like, I don't know, and I'm like, well, you're a big girl now, and in a year's time, Rachel, you'll be a woman. You'll know then.
Yeah, you're right. It is a very quotable show.
Oh, it's probably one of the most quotable shows. Take that, Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it's and honestly, you keep calling it a perfect show. Even if someone were to hesitate and like, it's hard to label something as perfect, I think you can very easily say that this is a type of show that you wouldn't really change anything in, at least.
No.
Because the execution, I think it just fulfills its purpose.
Yeah, I think the only issue I have, and this is something not even real, is the Scotch Mist episode is, I don't know, it's just never been it's my least favorite, and I don't know why. I agree. It doesn't hit as hard for me as the others. I think it's because it is a little lighter on the constant gags in comparison to the others. But I'm sure if I rewatch it again, there's going to be so many lines that I'm like, oh, of course, that classic line is in this episode.
Yeah, I believe that's also the episode that has the masseuse running gag, which I incredibly very much love. I think that episode suffers a bit from a lot of telling, not showing.
Yeah. I yet again, it does have your subtitles gag.
It does, yeah, but it's only really used like twice. I thought it might be used a bit more. There was like the phone call and then the final confrontation.
Yeah.
And in the YouTube playlist you linked me, and watching that all the way through was my experience with the show. The very last video was a deleted scene, which was meant to be the experience in Scotland.
Yeah.
And I feel like, for complaining that it was an episode that like did a lot of telling, not a lot of showing, I feel like that clip might have actually kind of worked if they played around with it a bit more.
Yet again, I also just love watching Garth Marenghi as Rick Douglas explain why he hates the Scottish so much. Just him seething with it. And are you, like, obviously we kind of discussed this a little bit, but are you happy with it just being 6 episodes? Because we are in a current time now where, TV shows, and we want more, and people want to bring things back, and we want more of this. And it is kind of funny to look at a show like this and go, oh, it's just 6 episodes. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it kind of lends itself to this is a notion that you've talked to me about. You watch a lot more TV shows than I do, and especially TV shows that have been on Netflix. And you've talked about how there are a lot of TV shows where it feels like they've fulfilled their initial vision within like the first season or two, but then they get another season that they have to find something to do with, and it's not great. I feel like, if anything can fulfill its purpose within a short period of time, then let's not gamble on trying to extend it too much. Like, if there's more ideas to be had, go for it. But if what you have is good enough, then this is good enough. They even have a gag in like some of the extra scenes where they mentioned that there were like 40 episodes.
Yeah.
I feel like if there literally were 40 episodes, maybe that would be a bit much. But I kind of like the lore of the fact that like only these 6 exist, and even then, the final episode is missing like what seems to be a third.
Yeah. What we got to talk a little bit more about Garth Marenghi, the man himself, the legend. What do you think of that character?
Yeah, he is certainly the mastermind behind everything we see in the show. He's incredibly pretentious. I really like the fact that he's always wearing some kind of sunglasses. Like, I never really get a sense of like what this guy actually looks like when he's not wearing them. I remember there was one in one of the extra scenes there was, and this was me being completely dumb, there was 1 or 2 shots where it was the Todd Rivers to the left of Dean Lerner, and in this scene Todd Rivers never says a word, and it's just Dean Lerner talking, and Todd Rivers is kind of on an angle and a bit shadowed, and I did not know who that was, and I was like, is this what Garth Marenghi looks like without his glasses? I do not know who this person is. And obviously that was me being dumb, but like part of my brain really did think like, oh man, maybe this is what I wasn't seeing. I don't know. It was bizarre, but
we do see Garth
Yeah.
without his glasses on when he has to kill Skipper the Eye Child because he takes his glasses off before then, and then he goes to reach them and put them on, and then like tickle his mouth, and then gets bitten.
true, but that was Rick Douglas.
Oh,
with
yeah,
Rick
you're right.
Douglas,
You're right. I'm sorry.
He's yes. You got the characters mixed up, Ryan. But yeah, but also Rick Douglas. He's not wearing sunglasses. He's wearing like proper glasses, so you can kind of see what's going on a bit more. The actual man behind the project, like that's the one whose eyes we don't.
Yeah,
really get
they're
to
more
see
like
much.
tinted glasses. Yeah. Garth Marenghi's perfect. There's so many characters. Sacha Baron Cohen tries to do this with Bruno, and there's so many other characters of people making a comedy character that's commenting on the pretentious side of the world, specifically art. Whether now we have lots of commentary characters on hipster culture and the PC culture and all that, whatever. Don't care. Garth Marenghi is the apex character of that kind of comedy, of that critique. He is the ultimate apex, he is the best character of making fun of the clueless, pretentious, arrogant person. Garth Marenghi is that good of a character and so well performed, and it's so interesting to me that you look up the actor on IMDb, and he's done stuff, but he hasn't really done much. And I've seen some of the other stuff he does, and usually in everything else I've seen him in, he's usually a secondary person, and he's usually someone who plays, not to paint with a broad brush, I've only got a few examples, but he usually plays kind of more quiet, subdued characters. It seems like Garth Marenghi is the big character in which he really lets loose with his overt, kind of over-the-top comedy chops. So the other times he kind of seems to me more so to be in line with playing kind of meeker characters a lot more, which is interesting.
That was the impression I got from just looking at the list. Like he's acted in 19 things. All of them were TV productions, and a lot of them just like listed the specific episodes of that TV show that he was in.
Yeah.
I think his name was like what, Matthew Holness
Yeah,
or something?
yeah. And interesting guy, and I love his performance as Garth Marenghi and as Rick Douglas, as Garth Marenghi playing Rick Douglas, because there's another level to it, because he clearly thinks he's great. Like Garth Marenghi clearly thinks when he's acting as Rick that he's doing a really great job. Like when he works with children, like when he has those scenes when he comes into the kiddie wing.
Yeah.
And, he just is such a fucking asshole, and you can't help but love it.
Yep, they're great examples of them not being subtle.
Oh, yeah.
There's like, this is the scene that's meant to make you remember that this character, Rick Douglas, is the greatest man ever.
Yeah.
Even if the last one ends with a cutaway to Dean Lerner talking about how he hit the child.
But they say it in, like, it's a positive manner. Yeah, and Matt Berry. Matt Berry is our university lecturer and tutorer and former guest on the show, Liam. Liam is Matt Berry. I've never seen them in the same room, but they are both portly gentlemen who speak like this all the time.
Yeah.
Aren't they?
I remember once you brought up Matt Berry, not talking about like who he is or the fact that he was in Darkplace, and you're like, oh, he's the guy from Darkplace that sounds like Liam, and I was like, oh, I think I know who you mean.
He sounds like and acts like Liam. It is so true. But I love Matt Berry as well. His show Toast of London is an absolute joy and pleasure. You should check it out at some time, Bartek. It is brilliant. Him playing a failed, washed up actor trying to get his shit back together. I know it sounds a little unusual for Matt Berry to do, but it is what he does. And it's got songs in every episode practically. So if you want to hear Matt Berry sing some more, you get some more of that.
He is a singer.
One track lover. love how it's shot as well, like an 80s music video, like with the rain coming at the window and him in his underpants. It's so stupid, but it's so perfect.
I hope he has Richard Ayoade backing him up.
Now, I know you're not as familiar with British personalities and TV stuff, but were there any people that turned up in supporting roles or otherwise that you were kind of surprised or like pleasantly like or were happy to see turn up? Any familiar faces?
Not at all.
No familiar faces for you?
Well, I mean, I know who Richard Ayoade is, but otherwise not at all.
Well, the Padre and the evil monkey man are the Mighty Boosh, the guys from the Mighty Boosh.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Okay.
I'm surprised, they seem like comedy people would be up your alley. And when we grew up, the Mighty Boosh were very, very popular, especially in meme terms, I guess. Like with Old Greg was very popular when we were teens.
I remember an old friend of mine once showed me a clip of Old Greg. That's probably my only experience with it, just watching it on YouTube.
Were they called Greg?
The friend?
Yeah, your old friend.
No, his name was Matthew.
Okay. You had them turn up. My favorite is Stephen Merchant, who voiced Wheatley in Portal 2 and works with Ricky Gervais a lot. He was the co-creator of Extras and The Office. He played the chef in that one episode and in Darkplace, who was so tall.
My favorite episode.
Who was so tall, because Stephen Merchant is really tall. Like, he's like 6'6" or something ludicrous, that he's so tall and he's wearing the chef's hat, the tall chef's hat, that when he walks through a door, he has to do a full-on lunge to walk through it without hitting his head. And it is...
That whole sequence was great.
His stiff acting and like constant repetition of his lines, just constant just things of him just saying, oh, where's the chicken? Where's the chicken? Oh, the chicken be ready when I say it's ready. So stupid. But yeah, for me, there was a smorgasbord of fun British comedy people that just turned up for a scene here and there, and it was nice to see them, and it made me want to go back and rewatch their own products and shows and music and whatever else. This is nothing related to anything, but one of my other favorite visuals that I thought that you would like is there's that in the second episode too, I'm pretty sure, when the guy is being chased down the hallway by the stapler and he's just screaming constantly in that one tone, and he runs to the phone and he phones, I need Rick Douglas, and then he just keeps screaming.
Yep.
So dumb.
Yeah, I'm a bit more sure now. I think that is my favorite episode.
Yeah, it's a damn fine one. Anything else you want to comment about Darkplace? Any particular things you want to bring up that you feel like we haven't?
This is outside the realm of the 6 episodes, but I did watch all those special features, and there were a lot of those behind the scenes to the camera conversations, like a lot. I think there was over an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I think I did myself a bit of a disservice trying to watch all of those in just one sitting.
Yeah.
I feel like it might have been a bit much, but again, that doesn't really apply to the TV show itself.
Dude, they do audio commentaries as the characters on the DVD.
That I'd be interested in.
Yeah, it's so good.
I can imagine.
I do love the dedication as well to the characters that they put in. Like they do feel, although they're clearly comedy characters, they do feel like they are really lived in and real in a way. Like they really have an authenticity that we've mentioned, but also just it does feel like they've really thought hard about who these people are, where they came from, and what they're about.
Yeah, I cannot complain about the fact that there is over an hour worth of footage in the special features, but yeah, just the fact that it exists alone is very admirable, because I did watch all of it and they were in character the whole time.
There's several lines from the special features that are very iconic, and most people don't even realize that they weren't in episodes. Like, I'm pretty sure it's in one of the behind the scenes, correct me if I'm wrong, but where Garth Marenghi states, like, the first horror novel really was the Bible. I think That's
think that was there, yeah.
that's in one of the and that's why the classic, or like I said, the why Dean Lerner doesn't smoke cigarettes is because he doesn't want to get cancer. Or just Todd Rivers talking about like, and that's why I fell in love with a broccoli woman. Just,
There was a lot of Todd Rivers in those behind the scenes things, because I think in the show itself they didn't get him
Until
to
3
do
episodes
talking
in, I
until
think.
until a few episodes in.
one of my favorite behind the scenes little Todd Rivers moments is, and Bartek, you must have been nodding your head and going, because this is exactly something we've had to do when we were studying drama, which is when Todd Rivers discusses rhythms, doing rhythm, like speaking in rhythms as an actor, and how he has like, he's like pacing and steps and rhythms and like talking about that, and he's like, and Garth, well, I guess he's like he's a marching band, I guess, dun dun dun, like, and Dean Lerner, I guess, like, can you imagine, what was it he said, like a mentally retarded child at a drum kit?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
We've had that. We've experienced that. We've been taught that, in a way, without it being as simplified as how Todd Rivers states it. But when I watch that, I'm just like, yeah, that's kind of how it's kind of broken down. Like in the scene, obviously it's played as a bit of a joke, of course, but I was just sitting there nodding, going, yep, I kind of remember when Shaz taught me that in drama. Yeah.
Mm.
That was
And yeah, I think at one point, I think Garth mentions Stanislavski. I think the amount of times I've heard that name,
well, he
can't even count.
He mispronounces it several times. Yeah, you said it right, Stanislavski, but he calls him Stanislavski or something stupid. He has like an extra something on the end. I can't remember what it was. And he's like acting like, you know who that is, right? And he's like, clearly you don't. Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say about Garth Marenghi other than this is a quintessential show. If you like comedy, it's worth checking out. It is, like I said, brilliantly written, brilliantly acted, multiple layers to it. It's really quite a complex beast when you think about how they had to have made it. Like the amount of effort it actually takes, because not to suck our own dicks, Bartek, but we did a very similar type of project in university and we did pretty successfully at it, and it was pretty well received, but it took a lot of work, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it did.
Because we've mentioned it on the pod before, when we were at university, our final year, our project, we had to do a collaborative effort, and we came up with a play called Soviet Western, in which a part of that play was this shitty Western made by a Soviet government, and then cut to, and this was on stage, interrupted, and you realize, oh, they're making the film, and it's about the behind-the-scenes production issues of making this film as well. And obviously a lot borrowed from Garth Marenghi, but we did our own spin. There was lots of other inspiration points, but it's actually really difficult to get the rhythm of it and the flow of it, because also, like, you could say, like, if they fuck this up from Garth Marenghi, you would just go, well, I just want it to be I just want to see the silly show and not the interview parts, or the other way around. But they do a good enough job of having enough of both. So that's why in the behind the scenes you have like an hour or more's worth of stuff that just didn't make it in, because they were wise enough to go, well, we don't want to have too little of one and too much of the other.
Yeah, for us it took a lot of serious thinking. There was even a whole, for our group specifically, an element of proving ourselves in a way to the people in charge of the class and even to the other groups. Like, yeah, we actually do have an idea here. We're not just going to goof around.
Yeah, and Garth Marenghi was a big source of inspiration for us, because structurally it is something really to marvel at, and just looking at how it's structured, and very well done. Garth Marenghi,
You know what?
Yeah.
Fun fact, I think it might even be the case that the day you showed me the first episode was the day that we solidified that we were going to do Soviet Western.
There you go.
Yeah.
And like, Yeah, it is. To me, a perfect show. 6 episodes. That's it. I mean, that's not all of Garth Marenghi as a character, Bartek, because I don't know if you know this, but they did a spin-off show called Man to Man with Dean Lerner.
I have not heard of this, no.
And it is excellent. It is also 6 episodes, in which the pitch of that show is we get to see Dean Lerner's late night talk show, in which each night he interviews a guest, and all of them are played by Matt Holness, and they're all different characters. The first one being Garth Marenghi.
Okay.
And it is great. It is. You would like it. I liked it. I like it a lot. It's a little bit more difficult to find, and not enough people talk about it enough. But it gives Dean Lerner some interesting things to do. You get to see more of him. Like it's him as the talk show host, and you get clips of him out and about doing stuff, because that's what those talk show hosts often do. They have their little skits and moments. Like I want to say in one of the episodes, it's been a little while since I've rewatched it, but Man to Man with Dean Lerner, really worth watching, is there's a skit or a section in his show where he's doing kind of like the Apprentice, right? And he's doing his Donald Trump, which is really funny. And, he's firing someone, and he says in that Richard Ayoade way, which is only hilarious when he says it, but he just says, you're a fucking toilet. That's what I think about you. Yeah. So
that is good.
Our friend who's been on the podcast many times and was the lead in Soviet West, and Will Brooks has major Richard Ayoade energy. Will. He would be Dean Lerner. If we had to put on Garth Marenghi, he would be Dean Lerner.
He would, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all I have to say. What about you? Your wrap-up thoughts, Bartek?
Wrap-up thoughts. It is a show that completely nails its execution, its mission statement. It is very funny, it is very visually interesting, and if you want to get an idea of, I guess, a kind of experience that is trying to intentionally evoke so bad it's good and does it in a good way, then this is one to check out.
Yeah, it is. It is worth watching. I mean, it has, like we said, there's just too much comedy and lines of dialogue to even get into, because, by God, it is just chock full of it. Like, as you were talking, I was just thinking about Garth Marenghi's whole little soliloquy about, riding on the wind or with his heart or whatever, and it's just so pretentious.
Oh, right, yeah. If he didn't have like ink and pages, he would write on the wind or something.
Yeah, or like, I just hit the words on the typewriter, getting in them in the right order though. That's the trick. That's the trick. Like, just so fucking. But yes, that is Garth Marenghi's Darkplace. So Bartek, where can the listening people find us?
You can find us on the internet. You can use Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome,
Thank you.
Safari. But using that, you can go to something called a search engine and find Spit and Polish Presents on websites such as Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio. There is a lot of places we are at. If you currently have access to the description of this episode, there are plenty of links there to find us. But even just Googling, you'll find us. You can contact us directly through our emails, spitandpolished@gmail.com. That was spitandpolished@gmail.com. You can also message us directly on Twitter and on Facebook. And we also have a YouTube channel where you can post comments.
Yep.
Talking about
Perfect
how
Blue
well
recently.
we did. Yeah, Perfect Blue. That was our, should I say most recent episode when this comes out?
Yeah.
Yeah, Perfect Blue, and if not, the Neon Demon.
Yeah, so pleasure, Bartek, talking spooky, scary Garth Marenghi's Darkplace. It is the biggest televisual event since Quantum Leap.